Oh my gosh. Hello guys, it's me, Butterfly Spirit 314. So guys, I know I need to comb my hair, but oh well. But that's not what this video is about. So guys, today what I want to talk about here is I want to talk about my journey from my car stalling at a stoplight to getting it fixed by a mechanic. And this does involve me talking about me going to AutoZone as well. So I'm going to just tell you guys everything that happened, ultimately up to how I got it repaired. My goal is not to make this super long and just to kind of keep things going. But I want to give you guys the important pieces of information you need to know. Okay, so one day I was leaving work, and basically I had just drove my car from out of a parking garage um, to a stoplight, which the stoplight was about maybe probably about 2 minutes away from the parking garage where I parked my car in. So what happened is I get to the stoplight. I'm sitting at this red stoplight waiting for it to turn green. And while I'm waiting for it to turn green, what happens is that all of a sudden out of nowhere, my car dies on me. So it actually stopped on me. What do I mean by that? What I mean is I'm sitting in my car is in drive, and I'm just waiting for the stoplight to change. And then all of a sudden, my car loses power. So basically, when I looked at the dashboard, right, it went from everything being on, me feeling the car being on and everything, and all of a sudden to the car just turning off on me. So when I looked at the dash, then I noticed that the lights on the dash were completely off. It's like the car just died. It's like the car had literally no life, no lights on or anything like that. Before the car ended up shutting off, stalling, or dying on me, before that happened, then I didn't get any warning lights on my car or anything like that. My car was just doing what it's supposed to be doing. It was just, on. So, so basically, it just shut off on me. So, like most people, what I did was first thing I was surprised that my car turned off because I'm like, this isn't normal for my car to do this. My car has a good battery. It had been tested at the dealer as well as at AutoZone. And so the battery was good. I've had this battery for several months. It's in good condition. All right. So I knew I had a good battery, right? So that wasn't the issue. So why else was my car dying on me? I really had no kind of idea as to why my car was dying. None. So what I ended up doing was I ended up trying to get my car to turn my car on because the light had turned green, and so I had to go. Okay, so I was surprised my car shut off, and I went to go ahead and turn my car on. People had noticed that my car had turned off or whatever, that I had not moved my car forward, right? And they noticed that, right? And there are people who kind of, went around me or whatever. But what my focus was on getting my car to turn on. So my key was still in the ignition. So what I did is I turned the key onto the on position to start my car, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. Okay, nothing. The car did not crank. It did not, start up like it normally does or anything like that. It didn't do it. Um, so what I did is I tried again to get it to start, and the car did not start. It didn't. So I immediately started to think about the fact that I was in the downtown area where I work at. I thought about, oh my gosh, what if I have to call a tow truck, and things like that. I do have roadside assistance, but Man, how much would it cost for a tow, all that stuff. So what I went to do is I went to put on my emergency flashers. And I put on the emergency flashers, and it was like the car kind of came to life when I put on the emergency flashers, right? So people would know, hey, something is wrong with my car. Okay. Right. So, and the downtown area where I work at, it's not much helpful because cars can only go certain ways, which is like really frustrating. So that also added kind of assault to injury. So I put on emergency flashers, and then I attempted to start my car one more time. And when I went to, put the, to start the car, all of a sudden the car started up. It came to life again. And I was like, oh, good. And I was panicked and very anxious. And because I was really panicked and anxious and stuff, my goal was getting home. So what I did was there might have been, some stoplights or whatever. What I ended up doing, because my car had stalled the way that it did, and I was on my way home. What I did is that I did go through a couple of red lights because I didn't want to run the risk of my car stalling on me or anything like that. I just didn't want to run the risk of all that. Okay. I just didn't want to. So, but eventually I got to a stoplight that I had to kind of sit at because there's people in front of me. So I couldn't like go through that. But luckily these weren't any lights that had cameras or anything like that. And normally I'm not the type of person to go through lights or whatever, like red lights or whatever. I made sure it's safe to do so. But the thing is, I want to see my car home. And I know that's a very important thing, especially if there are any of you ladies watching. If your car stalls on you, the very important thing you need to do is try to get your car to start. And another thing is try to call somebody. If you can't get your car to start, call somebody. Call somebody to let them know what's going on with you and where you are and what's going on. Okay. Gentlemen, for you guys, I would say, same thing for you. If your car stalls on you, and luckily for me, I was just sitting at a stoplight. There are some people whose cars die on them while they're driving down the highway or they're going through an intersection and then their car dies on them. You know what I mean? So, I was in really good hands, but there's some people who are not going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? So I'm so grateful that I was even able to, that I was just sitting at a stoplight. You know what I mean? So that's the good thing. But, most important thing, try to get your car to start back up and try a few times, try once, give it a minute, try it, and I mean a literal minute, then try again, give it another minute, then try again. Okay. So something I didn't know, and this is probably what happened. What happened to cause my car to stall, just for those of you who are watching at this point, is that there was my alternator. At this time, it probably failed or it completely died, and so I didn't find out until later when I had took my car in to get it fixed that that actually my car's alternator died, but then what happened is my battery had took over and started to power the car. Okay. So, but we're going to get to that. Okay. So we're going to get back to it. So I was, on my way home. Like I said, I had to sit through some stoplights, and stuff after going through a few of them safely. And then what I did is that, I just immediately, drove home. Okay. So it took me about maybe 15 or 20 minutes to get home. And then I had this feeling, I was like, wait a minute. My car has drove this whole way like normal, like nothing happened. What's going on? Now, here's something I want to caution some of you guys on here. Just because your car acts like it's fine, it doesn't mean your car is fine. It does not mean it's fine. By no means does it mean your car is fine. Okay. Don't believe the feeling. Um, don't believe the feeling with your car when it does that. Okay, just because it's driving fine or whatever and stuff. So when I got home, I turned my car off. Then I turned it back on, and my car started up just like normal, like there was nothing wrong with it. And I was like, well, what the hell happened when I was leaving work? Okay. So I know we're 10 minutes in, but we're gonna keep going because there's a lot of valuable information that I got to give you guys, and I want you to know this. Okay. So I had a kind of this gut feeling that I should take my car to AutoZone. And many of you guys, if you live in the US, United States, then there most likely is going to be either an AutoZone or an O'Reilly that might be near you or something like that. Some kind of place where you get your, car parts and stuff like that and things, right? And so, I listened to my gut feeling and I ended up taking my car to AutoZone. So started my car up, right? And I drove to an AutoZone. I drove to an AutoZone that I've had like my battery tested at before without any issue. Okay. So I get to AutoZone, and of course I'm nervous about turning the car off, but the car had drove, sat through other stoplights with no problem. But actually, before I went to AutoZone, I stopped off at the gas station because I was low on gas, and I kind of thought, okay, well maybe my car stalled because I didn't have enough gas, but that wasn't entirely, you know I got gas and stuff like that and things, but you know, still I wasn't convinced that was the answer, right? So went to the gas station, got some gas, put in my car, started the car up, started off like normal, like nothing had happened. Drove to AutoZone, the car gave me no issues. Now, like I'm saying here, guys, do not believe, do not believe that your car is fine after it's stalled on you. I don't care how good it sounds or it's driving like normal and it's doing its thing. Don't believe that. Do not believe your car. Do not believe it. Okay. So I go to AutoZone and I go into AutoZone. I wait a couple minutes and I said, well, hey, I'd like to get my starting system tested. Okay. Now, for many of you who've been to AutoZone, they'll test your starting system for free. They'll also test like a check engine light that you have, if that's a thing. Okay. So I had him test my starting system. Okay. So the guy comes out, I have to, of course, pop the hood. The guy puts the little connectors on the battery. And then, he tests the starting system and he didn't have me start the car. He's like, oh, you ain't got to start the car. I'm like, all right, cool. Cool. So the guy, he goes and tests the battery. He starts it. Then he's like, okay, like the machine, little tester, whatever that they have. And then he's like, okay, go ahead and start your car. So after that, it's a couple minutes. And then the guy at AutoZone, he's like, well, according to, this test, you have a bad starting system and a bad charging system. Okay. Now, for many of you guys who are watching and you get that result, it's probably confusing. It was confusing to me, right? I took the little printout, but the guy went a step further and he got like a little multimeter from out of AutoZone to test to put on the battery. So the multimeter is like this little gray thing, and they got this cord and put on the battery to test like the voltage of the battery. Okay. So when the guy tested the little multimeter on the battery, then he said the battery was reading, and the battery was saying that the battery was operating at a charge of about it was above 15. Now, your battery in most cars, they typically are going to be about like 14 point something, and that's normal, like 14.7 or whatever. That should be about healthy. And I mean, if you want to know what voltage your car battery should be at when it's running and not, then, you can definitely, you know, look it up online. Okay. So, so he's like, well, your battery's operating at, the voltage is over 15. That's dangerous. So I was like, what? He's like, you need to take your car to a shop. And I was like, what? He's like, well, if your car keeps doing this, then it can cause damage to your electrical system. All right. So this happened on a Monday evening. Okay. Guy gave me a little printout or whatever. And that gave me, definitely something to think about. Okay. So I was asking the guy at AutoZone, I was like, well, how is a shop going to know, what the problem is? He's like, oh, well, just tell them you have a bad charging system and a bad starting system, and then they'll be able to talk to you. So immediately the next morning, so I ended up, of course, driving home, okay, concerned about my car stalling and everything. And I had lost confidence in my car, okay. And for many of you, if your car stalls on you, dies on you, you may feel the same way. You may feel anxious every time you get into the car, okay. You may feel that way, all right. So basically, guys, I drove the car home, and this was well after a lot of shops had closed. It was like 5:30 or 6, so many of the shops in my area had closed already. So what I did is the next morning I called a local Dobbs. So that's like a huge, like a mechanic shop in my area. Then they have different locations at the Dobbs and stuff like that. Um, so what I ended up doing is I called a local Dobbs, and I talked to a guy who happened to be a manager at the Dobbs, and he was like new. And I told him what had happened to me, and he was like, well, he's like, well, it sounds like it could be your alternator that went out or whatever is failing or something, but we'd have to get you in order to look at your car and see what's going on. Okay. So I was like, okay, he's like, well, you can bring it in, you can bring it in tomorrow. We could take a look. I was like, well, hey, I haven't gotten paid yet. So, I want to bring it in on a day where I can get you guys to look at it. He's like, well, and I told him about AutoZone saying that I had a bad charging system and starting system. He was like, well, he said, well, there's a difference in price if we're doing a test on the charging system versus the starting system. And I said, what? Because in my mind, I'm thinking the problems relating between the battery, the starter, and the alternator. Now, what I will say, guys, is that when I was at AutoZone, the guy was telling me when I started up my car, he was telling me, oh, well, your car's, slow to start or whatever. I'm like, my car is starting up just like it normally does. There's nothing wrong with my car starter. Even though you're telling me that, there's nothing wrong with it. I can tell there's nothing wrong with it because my car always starts up like this. It starts so smooth like butter. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's fine. Um, and I don't know if the guy was trying to sell me a starter or something, but I'm like, no, I'll just go to the mechanic and let them tell me what's up. And typically with a starter, you'll kind of know that something's wrong with your starter. I had issues with a starter in my prior car that I had that I no longer have. In the past, I had a 1992 Honda Accord, and it had some starting issues, and eventually the starter did have to be replaced because eventually, the battery was dead. So, the issue was the starter. so, um, so, um, so I ended up, telling the guy at Dobbs, I was like, okay, which is a mechanic shop. I ended up telling him, I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, I will bring my car in on Friday. How does that work? He was like, oh, that works fine. And I said, well, how much do you guys charge for diagnostic? Now, at Dobbs, they charge a different diagnostic depending on whatever the problem is with your car. So for me, luckily, the diagnostic I think is normally, it just depends, because one of their diagnostics is like $54, another one is like $74.99. So it just depends. But depending on what you tell them, they'll tell you what the diagnostic fee is. And I recommend you guys do that before you go to a mechanic. Find out what their diagnostic fee is. And you guys may be like, why? Well, the reason that you want to do that is because you want to make sure you have the money in hand. If you don't already have the money in hand, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that you hold off on going until you can have the money, right? So since I was getting paid on Friday, I was like, all right, I'll take it in. But I'd already told them that I was going to bring it. So now you guys may be wondering, well, what did I do in the between time while I was waiting on the appointment? What I did is that the next day I drove my car to and from work like normal, and the car drove fine. But I wasn't convinced that I was out of the woods yet, that my car was fine, even though it stalled. I was not convinced of that. So what I did is that I ended up deciding to, I think I drove my car for a couple more days. Then I took it to, actually, yeah, I drove my car Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I believe Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Now, Friday, I ended up dropping my car off at the Dobbs mechanic shop. Okay. Dropped it off there in the morning. And then I ended up taking a public transportation to work. So I took a tram or a train to my job, while my car was being checked out at Dobbs. And I figured that by the time I got off work, I could come and get my car, so I wouldn't have any issues or anything like that. And so what I did is that I ended up checking in every couple of hours and calling to make sure they got to my car. And luckily I did, because from 8 to 12, usually at mechanic shops, if you drop your car off in the morning at like 7 in the morning or something like that, they may have other people there getting various services done to their car. All right. But even if that's the case, the thing you want to do, very important, is you want to give it time for them to check out your car. Typically, I usually give them about 4 hours to check it out. So since my car got there at 7, I was like, I'll wait till about 12 o'clock and then I'll call them. So when I was at work around about 12 o'clock, I called the local Dobbs to check on my car to see if they got to me yet. Talked to the guy who I dropped the car off with. He was like, we haven't gotten to you yet. And I was like, well, I dropped my car off at 7. He was like, well, we're working on somebody that has a transmission and it's taking a little longer and everything, but we're going to try to get you in. And so I was like, all right, but me being who I am, I wanted to still make sure my car was going to be looked at. So I waited another hour. Then I called back just to see if they got me checked out. Okay. My car. So called back. Still, I was told, hey, we haven't gotten to you yet. We're going to try to squeeze you in. We're going to move some things around for you, And I was like, all right, cool. And I told the guy, I said, I want to make sure my car gets checked out and stuff, because this is my primary source of transportation. So I need to make sure that I'm going to get my car back. He's like, we're going to get you in for sure or whatever. So that's what he told me. So I ended up calling back. I think it was about, I ended up calling back, I think, and the guy told me for sure we're going to get you in. He said, by the time you come pick up your car, we'll have a cause. So the guy called me about maybe 3. And he said, okay, we got your car checked out or whatever. He said, you can come in, when you come and pick it up, you need to just come and pick it up, everything. So I was like, okay. So I had to get on public transportation, a tram, and take the tram or train all the way out to the station closest to where my car was. And then of course I had to walk up the hill to the Dobbs where my car was. When I went to pick up my car, and I got there, the mechanic was like, well, the manager, he was like, well, he's like, what we checked out and we discovered is, he said, I talked with the mechanic and your alternator is covered in oil because my car has some oil leaks. But to me, it's a couple of drip drops on the ground. I don't, see any huge problem. I know it's got an oil leak, right? Most people's cars got oil leaks. Well, some people do, some people don't. But I'm no stranger to oil leaks because my 1992 Honda Accord had an oil leak. The car still ran fine. It had issues, but whose car doesn't have issues? So he was like, your alternator's covered in oil. He said, and I told him about that I was low on gas and stuff like that. He was like, well, he's like, well, if you don't feel safe with the car, he's like, well, then you might want to get that fixed and stuff. And he told me some other things going on with the car. He's talked about the leaks that there was and everything, like the oil leaks and stuff and everything, And so after that, I picked up my car, drove it home, and then I ended up asking the guy, I was like, well, how much would it be to get the alternator fixed? And he said that it would cost me to get the alternator fixed, so it would be $792. $792, and I think it was like 13 cents is how much it would cost to replace my alternator. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot of money for an alternator. I was like, really? I was not expecting that. I was hoping 300 or so, whatever. But he was like, well, your alternator is going to cost about $415. And then it's going to take 2.5 hours of labor to put your alternator in. So that's what gets you to the 792.13 or whatever. I was like, I think it was 772.13, but then you got the tax. Okay. So I was like, dang. So I drove my car home and I was kind of left thinking. Now, when I drove my car home, my car was driving fine, like normal, like it never stalled or anything. Guys, I'm going to tell you again, just because your car drives like it's fine doesn't mean it is. Don't believe that when your car drives fine, because that's kind of to give you that false sense of thinking that, oh, my car is all right, it's fine, I'm good. Okay. So, so I was like, if my alternator is covered in oil, I need to, get this fixed. And so I did some research and looked online and to see if other people were experiencing things that I was. So I found a post on Reddit, and there were people who were saying, if my alternator is covered in oil, will it cause it to stall? And the answer is yes, it will. It will cause your car to shut off on you. And especially if you have oil leaks. Now, there are some people who said, well, you should get the oil leaks done first, then replace the alternator, because otherwise you're going to do an alternator or it's just going to drip on there, right? Now, here's what I'm going to tell you guys here. For me, I'm trying to keep my car going. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just get this alternator replaced. And other people were having this problem too, right? I ended up, deciding that I was going to save up in order to get my alternator fixed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to set aside this money, to get my alternator fixed. And then when I get paid next time, then I'll combine that money and I'll have enough in order to get the alternator fixed. Now, in the meantime, you guys may be wondering, did I just drive my car like normal? The answer is no. So what I ended up doing was I ended up taking, after that day, I ended up taking public transportation. So I ended up taking public transportation to get to work. And I would basically take it, to and from work, and have my car set and stuff. Now, I would drive my car You know, if I had to go take care of things, and my car drove fine. It drove like it was okay, like it never stalled or anything. Started up fine. You know, I could go here, there, whatever, with no issue. Okay. Now I will tell you guys the fact that there were some things with my alternator that with my car that I did not know were linked to the alternator. That were some warning signs that your alternator is having an issue. And this is what some signs I noticed. So shortly after I bought my car last year, I noticed that my headlights at nighttime, they were flickering. They were literally flickering. Okay. You know, and your headlights are not supposed to flicker like that. They're not supposed to. If you have flickering headlights, that's a sign that there's something wrong with your alternator. Something's going on. And your alternator is in charge of distributing the electricity throughout your car. Okay. And what it does is it builds up a charge and it sends that electricity throughout the car to power your car. Okay. And I will tell you guys, your battery is not responsible for running your car. It's not responsible for doing that. And it can't do that for very long. Okay. It is not. Yes, your car may be able to run without an alternator, but it's a gamble if you do that. It is. For me, at some point, my alternator eventually went out, and it did eventually go out. I think my alternator was still operating and functioning, and it still was, but there was clearly something wrong with it because it was sending voltage to my battery and it was overpowering the battery. Okay. Okay. So another sign my car was doing too was when I would get in the car and let's say I have my car in park or in drive or reverse. Okay. Um, I noticed that my lights on my dash were flickering. And they have been doing that for a long time. They have been getting brighter and then getting dimmer, brighter, then dimmer, and stuff like that. And I noticed that with my car. And I noticed my car was doing that. And I didn't put two and two together about what was going on. I didn't know, you know. To me, it might have been like an issue with the battery, but nothing serious, right? You know, it's my first time dealing with this. So, what I ended up doing, guys, is I ended up just ignoring that, you know. But, you know, after a while, I got to the point I'm like, something must be wrong. So, you know, while I was saving up and stuff and taking public transportation and stuff, going to it from work, you know, I was doing research on the alternator, you know, a failing alternator, bad alternator, and stuff like that. And I watched this video, and this guy was talking about the fact if you have a bad alternator. So I watched Scotty Coleman's video on if you have a failing alternator. And one of the telltale signs that you have a bad alternator is that your car will die on you. It will stall on you while you're driving, which is what happened to me. I watched another video where a guy said, well, if you have a situation with your car and you notice that you're I'm trying to remember what he said. He was saying that there are some things you're going to notice. Okay. You'll notice I believe he was talking about that you'll notice that your car lights are getting brighter and dimmer, which is what my car was doing on the outside with the headlights, and then the ignition lights is what was going on with me. Okay. He was talking about most of the headlights. And then another thing I kind of noticed with my car was I noticed a kind of a burning rubber smell that was going on under the hood. And I'm thinking, oh, it's probably just the oil dripping on a belt or something like that. But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all. That's not what it was. Okay. No, it wasn't that. It was the alternator. You know, like a burning rubber smell is the alternator. Now it's a lot of smells, you know, that your car can produce, but you know, this one was related to the alternator. Another thing is the car stalling. Okay. The car stalling on me. That was the biggest telltale sign. And I was like, okay, I got to get my alternator replaced. You know, I got to do this, you know, because I wanted to kind of chalk it up to be like, oh, maybe I can drive on it. Maybe it's fine. Maybe I'm just making a big deal out of this. But you know what? I decided, I was like, no, I'm gonna do this. Now I did get some advice from another guy, Dobbs. He was like, oh, well, such and such is probably just trying to sell you an alternator. You know, Your alternator doesn't run the car, it doesn't do that. Your alternator is responsible for distributing the electricity throughout your car, and it's responsible for charging your battery, and it's responsible for keeping your car running. Okay, it's an alternator. Your battery's starting the car, okay, and it's keeping the lights on in the car, right? It's powering stuff, but for the charge. Your alternator is what's in charge of keeping your car on while you're driving down the road. So this other guy, Dobbs, was over here giving me some misinformation, and it caused me to be a little confused, right? But I was like, you know what? Nope. I'm gonna get this alternator replaced, because of the research I did. So I scheduled an appointment for my car. I told them when I was gonna bring it up to get it fixed. Now, when I ended up bringing my car in to get fixed, I dropped it off at 7. Okay. I thought that I was going to be able to get my car back the same day. Turns out, I was supposed to have it back by 3. Okay. Because I took off that day, thinking I was going to be able to just pick it up, by 12 or at least 3 o'clock. I didn't end up getting my car back that same day, the day they were fixing the alternator, because they found that there was something else that they needed to replace. So they needed to replace my serpentine or drive belt. So that was like extra, like $55 or something like that, which to me, I was like, shit, I didn't plan for this. Okay. So, but they said, do you still want us to work, get that in? Because the guy was like, well, your car's alternator is going to depend on that belt, because otherwise you're going to be right back up here if you don't get this serpentine belt and this drive belt fixed. So I was like, okay. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going ahead, and I ended up telling them, go ahead and fix it. Okay. Now, like I said, I expected to pick my car up that evening, about 3 o'clock. When I went to go pick up my car at about 4:30, thinking it was done, guess what happened? My car wasn't ready yet. The guy told me, he's like, well, can we keep your car to tomorrow? Because our mechanic, he has, your car basically the alternator hasn't been put in yet and stuff. Can we keep it to the morning, and we'll get you together in the morning and you can come pick it up tomorrow? I said, okay, fine. As long as I can have my car back by 9, I'm good. Turns out, I went home. I was kind of frustrated that I didn't have my car. It was like pissed that I didn't have my car. I couldn't drive it home. But I wouldn't be able to drive home anyway, because they had taken the alternator out, and I kind of had a suspicion that they didn't have the alternator part yet, and they probably had to wait till the morning in order to be able to fix it. Okay. So the next morning I go to pick up my car, and they got me together, and it was fixed. Now, what I will tell you guys, when I picked up my car, the guy told me, he's like, hey, actually he told me the prior day when I was there, he said, hey, there's another repair that you need to get done. So he's like, well, you need to get your crankshaft and harmonic balancer. You need to get that fixed, because if you don't get that fixed, you're not going to have a car. I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, because, you need that to operate, to get your car together. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, okay, that's something else on my list I'm gonna be taking care of, which I'm completely fine with taking care of, and things. But I did get my alternator fixed, and I will tell you guys, with my car. Now my car is really sensitive, so when I got in the car, it was a check engine light on. I've had a kind of intermittent check engine light since I picked up my car. But I was told that I have a loose battery cable that needs to be replaced. So I'm thinking that's what's going on with my car. That's why it's doing the check engine light and stuff and coming off, turn it on, turn off, or whatever every so often. So I'm going to be getting that taken care of too. So that gets everything out the way. So the reason I even went through this whole thing with you guys, and let me finish up a little. Picked up my car. I've noticed that I've been driving it. Yeah, I've had the check engine light on, but my car drives like normal. I've noticed no more flickering lights, no more flickering headlights, no more ignition lights on the dash getting brighter and dimmer. It's no longer doing that. Okay. My radio no longer works because obviously they had to disconnect the battery. So I'll have to go to the dealer to get them to like re-put that code back inside on the radio. But I've noticed that my car, it's been doing what it's supposed to do, like it needs to do, which is good. So I got one thing checked off. If you guys do experience something with your alternator, I do recommend Googling to find out how much it'll cost to replace the alternator in your car. Getting a range of how much it's going to cost, because for me, the range was like between $655 up to like $1,500. Okay, to get an alternator fixed. I ended up paying somewhere in the middle, which was the $772.13 plus tax. So luckily, I was able to take care of that. Now, there's a lot of you out there who, this might come out of nowhere, but I do recommend you guys to definitely make sure you get your alternator checked out and stuff. We're going into fall here, and soon we'll be in winter, and winter can be very hard on cars, and it's very important, guys, that you make sure that you get your car checked out, make sure you get your tires checked out and everything, so you're good to go for the winter, because you don't want to have your car breaking down in the middle of winter. It's not worth all that, especially when it's super cold. Okay, so I do have another repair that I gotta do. Of course, I gotta take her to oil leaks and all that, but so far so good. My car's doing what it's supposed to do, and things. Yeah, I got the check engine, but that it kind of comes on and then like it'll turn off and stuff. So I think it's the battery moving around, that cable moving around and stuff. But I think everything's just fine for now. But anyway, guys, just wanted to kind of share my adventure, my journey with you guys. And the reason I wanted to share that is because I want you guys to understand that if your car stalls on you, it can be super scary. And for me, I was super lucky. For some of you, you may or may not be as lucky. Now, I will tell you, if your alternator goes out, there's no guarantee that your car battery is going to be able to take over and power your car. There's no guarantee of that's going to happen. Okay. Luckily for me, I was able to drive my car, even though I knew they had something wrong with it. But I was adamant about getting that alternator fixed, and getting it out of the way. There are some people who just gonna drive their car into the ground and not care. But for me, guys, I definitely feel for me, guys, that it's super important for me to get my stuff together and stuff to make sure that that my car is together, so that when wintertime comes, I don't have to worry about it. And once something is fixed, guys, then you're golden, provided you go to a good quality shop. Now, some people are going to go to a dealer and stuff to get things done. You go to a dealer, they're going to charge you a lot more money, actually going to Dobbs did save me money compared to what the dealer might have charged me, and also these days, getting in and get your car fixed, if you go to a dealer, it might take you a month to get in to get your car fixed, and you might have to book and wait a month and stuff like that and things, and that can be very stressful depending on where you get your, what dealer you go to, what kind of car you have and stuff. So anyway, guys, I really want to thank you guys for watching this video. I hope this has been super duper helpful for those of you guys who chose to watch it to the end. I hope some of you do, because it could really save you a lot of time and frustration. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.